Hey guys, this is Derek here. I just wanted to go over my Rainbow Cup experiences. In this video, I'll be going over two tournaments, and here's the squad that I used. The first tournament I actually played in was a Rainbow Cup down in Kenosha, Wisconsin. Unfortunately, my videos did not save for that, but I did want to share with you that I did take first at that tournament. So, did pretty well. Did take an L in the first round of the tournament and then came back. But I did record most of my matches for my Madison, Wisconsin Rainbow Cup. This is actually the one that I hosted, and so here we'll get into the first round. Alright, so in the first round, my opponent used this squad here. Was slightly concerned about the Mantine, but I knew I could do well against the Meganium and the Raichu. So we'll get into the action here. And so we're going to start out and we're going to lead with Lantern here. And so Lantern versus Ivysaur, obviously not a great matchup at all. So I'm kind of stuck in this sort of precarious position here. I am going to fire off a few attacks here since thankfully it doesn't do a ton of damage. And then I'm going to flip out into my Charizard. I didn't shield here, which was not the greatest decision. I thought maybe since this was kind of a newer-ish player, he might get locked into a grass attack there, but he does fire off the Sludge Bomb. Then he flips into Fortress, which is probably not the greatest move here. I should also mention that this is actually Game 2. I did not record Game 1. I had some technical difficulties, but here I'm able to kind of finish off this Fortress here, be able to farm quite a bit of energy as well, so I can shoot off a blast burn on whatever comes in here, and he brings in his Lantern here, which he shields that attack, and he is going to end up taking out the Charizard here. So here I go ahead and I kind of weight down the switch clock a little bit, but probably not as much as I should have, but so be it. But I do bring in Quagsire. Quagsire versus Lantern has an excellent matchup. The only thing I've got to be worried about is a Hydro Pump. And I think I miscounted here on my attack, so I do shield, and he Thunderbolts me. I probably shouldn't have shielded the Thunderbolt. If I would have counted correctly, it wouldn't have been a shield on my part. But either way, I'm able to destroy the Lantern here, and I know that his last mon is this Ivysaur. I've still got a shield advantage on him here, but I am able to throw up a Stone Edge, which is going to destroy this Ivysaur. So all of his shields are down, and now all his mons are down. So that was the end of Game 2, Round 1, and I do finish that off. So going into round 2 here, again, slightly concerned about the Mantine. I know I've got good matchups against the Typhlosion, though. Typhlosion is probably the least threatening fire type, in my opinion, in this meta. So we're going to get into the action here. So I start with Azumarill. I love starting with Azumarill, and I actually bring that because of the Mantine. It's got great matchups against the Mantine. It does decent against the Fortress. It does really well against the Typhlosion. So I'm just going to have this guy in here, and I'm going to fire off an Ice Beam. That's what you want to do to maximize your damage against Mantine, especially since I don't really have any other super hard counters for it. So I'm just going to go ahead and let this Azumarill wall the Aerial Ace. So the Aerial Ace comes in, does a little bit of damage. I'm going to fire off some more bubbles here, try and build up to another Ice Beam. At this point, I'm going to sit here and take yet another Aerial Ace. Since he didn't shield, I didn't shield. And I overfarm a little bit of energy here and then shoot off an Ice Beam. I wanted to make sure I had some energy built up, so depending on what this shield looks like. So he does actually shield that there. And then what I'm going to do here is going to, I believe I take, I actually throw up my shield here, so that way then I can fire off one more Ice Beam, and either I'll be finishing off his shields or finishing off his Mantine. Alright, so he doesn't shield, so right now we're even on shields at 1-1, but I am up on Mons. He swaps in the Fortress here, so I go ahead and do a few more bubbles here. I try to fire off my Ice Beam. Unfortunately, I might have overtapped there and didn't quite get off the Ice Beam. So I go ahead and I flip in Charizard here, which obviously has a fantastic matchup. As you can see, I immediately pull up the switch screen there in case he decides to swap. That way I'm ready to flip into the Quagsire and have a positive matchup. So I do that here, and I try to flip, and obviously I'm having some major issues flipping, so I just go ahead and I shoot off the Dragon Claw here. hoping maybe I can grab his last shield, which I don't, but then I flip out anyways. I flip into my Quagsire. So I'm just going ahead and trying to farm up a little bit of energy here. At this point, I've got no shields remaining. I take an Earthquake. And I'm going to do some damage here. I'm going to fire off the Stone Edge here just in case he goes ahead and shields. Want to save a little bit of energy. So he does shield that now. I've got no shields remaining. So at this point, Quagsire is going to go down. Quagsire drops, but I'm able to flop back into Charizard, and since I actually had issues switching, I had energy farmed up, and I'm able to shoot off a Dragon Claw and a couple of fast attacks here and take down the Quagsire. So thankfully, no Stone Edge coming in to drop my Charizard. He has to bring back in the Fortress here, and at this point, he's going to take a big old Blast Burn to the face, and that's going to go ahead and drop the Fortress. So that's game one. Obviously had a little bit of a switch issue there. May have overtapped slightly in that matchup, but didn't end up being the end of the world and was able to take game one. Going into game two here of round one, we're going to see what kind of adjustments both me and my opponent take. Alright. So here we're going to be opening with Lantern, and he opens Mantine. I had a feeling he might open Mantine again. Mantine's just decent against this squad. So I go ahead and I open with the Lantern. Obviously, Water Gun doesn't do a ton of damage, and he's doing a little bit more with his fast moves. But things like Aerial Ace and Ice Beam aren't going to do much of anything to the Lantern, so I can just go ahead and wall all of his charge attacks. I'm also able to farm up a ton of energy here, and I farm up a whole bunch and then fire off a Thunderbolt. And he's obviously going to shield this, otherwise he's going to fall. So he throws up his shield, but I'm already almost halfway to another Thunderbolt. So I go ahead and I take some more damage here. Again, not worth shielding on the Aerial Ace, because as soon as I get off a Thunderbolt that connects, he's going to fall. Alright, so here's another Thunderbolt, and on this one, he actually lets his Mantine go down, so I probably didn't want to burn all the shields there, not knowing what I had. He flips into Quagsire, I pull up the switch screen here, and I'm going to flop out into my own Quagsire. He's going to have a little bit of an energy advantage, but I am at quite a shield advantage here. So I go ahead and shield this Earthquake. Earthquake does a ton to Quagsire, as you may have seen in the previous match. But I'm going to go ahead and farm up enough energy here for an Earthquake and then throw my own here. So it's either going to basically knock him out, or it's going to do a ton of damage. And so it does a ton, almost knocks him out. At this point here, I'm going to go ahead and shield. I'm going to have no shields remaining, but neither does my opponent. Actually, my opponent still has a shield remaining, but either way, he didn't shield there, so I've got a huge advantage on energy. And his last mon is going to be this Fortress here. It's going to take a huge Stone Edge. I'm at a huge advantage here. All of my mons remaining are going to have positive matchups against Fortress. So I'm in really good shape here. And unfortunately, I believe this ends up being a 3-0, where I have all of my mons remaining, and I end up dropping all of his. So, all right. So his Fortress does get off an attack here, but it's only a Heavy Slam. Doesn't even knock out the Quagsire at all. So I throw up one more Stone Edge here. All right, and that Stone Edge takes down the Fortress. Alright, so this is going into my match number 3, and this is actually against my good friend. This is against Babinski, so thanks a lot, Lauren, for the good series here. So we're going into game 1 of round 3. I'm always, slightly concerned what's going to happen in mine and Lauren's matches. She doesn't play as much as she was when PvP first came out, but she's still really good. She knows all of the matchups. She did test a lot with our small group of friends who play quite a bit together. So, hey, huge shout out to Lauren, and I'm sure this is going to be a good series here. So, we're going into the match, and we are opening with Quagsire. She opens Meganium, which is a terrible matchup. I think Meganium is obviously the worst grass type in comparison to Venusaur. So I actually flip into my Venusaur, and Venusaur has a very positive matchup against Meganium. Sludge Bomb does huge damage against it. It's very, very potent. She actually shields the Sludge Bomb here. So I have positive shields now, and she goes ahead and she flips out into her fortress. So that's obviously not a good matchup. I actually accidentally hit the Sludge Bomb here. That was a huge mistake. Should have just gone ahead and used the Frenzy Plant. So that doesn't do squat, and I'm here in a terrible matchup, just trying to get off another attack. So I don't get to that, and I just go ahead and let the Venusaur go down. Not great matchup. She's got a little bit of energy left over on the fortress there, but I'm able to swap in Charizard here, which is super positive on my part. She's not going to get off to another charge attack, and I'm able to drop the fortress. At this point, my switch clock is almost back open as well, so I know I'm in decent shape there. And she actually brings in her Charizard, and I'm going to throw a huge fire Blast Burn at this guy. Blast Burn is the correct move in Charizard versus Charizard. It actually does more damage than the Dragon Claws, so she does not shield, and then I'm able to go ahead and get enough energy here for a Dragon Claw of my own. I go ahead and throw up a shield on her Blast Burn, and then I get my Dragon Claw off immediately after that. Alright, so she shields the Dragon Claw. Probably not the best shield on her part, as I'm able to go ahead and I'm going to be able to use my fast attacks to go ahead and take out her Charizard before she has another charge move ready. And then I'm ready to just throw a Blast Burn at this Meganium. It's going to be the end of Meganium there and the end of Game 1 of Round 3. So we're going to go into Game 2 here next. So probably not too many corrections I need to make on my part at all. Despite a bad lead, I was able to pull off that game. So I actually go ahead and I actually start with a Azumarill in this game. Obviously slightly fearful that I'm going to be stuck in a bad matchup, but Azumarill versus Quagsire isn't bad at all. So I go ahead and I start throwing off some bubbles here. Keep going to try and get an Ice Beam. Ice Beam's going to do decent damage against the Quagsire. She does power up to a charge move first. I go ahead and let this go through, and a Sludge Bomb. I forgot Sludge Bomb was on Quagsire for a second there. But it didn't do that much damage. I still am over half health. I fired off an Ice Beam. Since I didn't shield, she didn't shield, so I'm able to get the Ice Beam through, which does actually slightly more than the Sludge Bomb had done to me. At this point, she's firing off another attack here. I'm assuming it's going to be another Sludge Bomb, and it is, so I throw up a shield. I'm almost to another Ice Beam here. I want to go ahead and actually switch out here, though. I want to save the energy on the Azumarill, so I flip into Venusaur, which has a huge positive matchup. I'm going to let this attack go through. So it ends up being a Stone Edge, which does a little over half health, but I am able to take down the Venusaur, or my Venusaur is able to take down the Quagsire. And she brings in Charizard, which obviously isn't great, but I am going to hit a Sludge Bomb. Sludge Bomb does huge damage versus Charizard if it goes through. And on this one, it does go through, so I'm almost able to take out the Charizard in a single hit. Obviously, Venusaur is going to go down. She's going to have a ton of energy already farmed up. So at this point, then I'm going to flip back into my Azumarill and fire off the Ice Beam that I already have charged. Ice Beam should either knock it out or she'll shield, so she shields that. And at this point then, we're even on shields, we're even on Mons, and I'm able to take down the Charizard with Bubble. So she goes ahead and she brings in her Azumarill. So at this point, I'm able to go ahead and hit a Play Rough. So that's the correct move to do versus an Azumarill. She's likely to shield here, though, since she's only on her last Mon. She actually doesn't shield that at all. So she's sitting on one shield. I thought she would for sure, but she made probably the correct play there and not shielding. So I'm stuck here with this Azumarill. I have to go ahead and let it go down. Which it almost dies. I get off one more Play Rough before the Azumarill goes down. And that does quite a bit of damage here. Unfortunately, she's going to farm up a whole bunch of energy here and is able to drop down my Azumarill. And here I am with Charizard, and Charizard has an awful matchup versus Azumarill. I've got one shield remaining. I need to put up that shield, and I'm a big dummy and didn't put up that shield. So here I am, and I'm going to go ahead and fire off a Dragon Claw. Not going to do almost anything at all to this Azumarill. This was probably my worst played matchup, I would say, of the day. And she's able to take me down because I didn't shield the Ice Beam. So that was not great, but she had a really positive matchup in the end there. So we are going to a Game 3 here in Round 3. So slightly concerned since this is obviously my toughest matchup of the day. I only went to one game 3 at my Kenosha tournament, and that's the round that I lost. So I'm always concerned whenever we go to a game 3 that I might take an L. So in game 3 here, I go ahead and I open Venusaur, and she opens Quagsire. So I corrected in this matchup, and she did not. She used the same start as she did in game 2. I tend to think that people do use the same team in back-to-back matches if they win the first one. So I started with Venusaur, positive matchup. She flips into Charizard, and now I've got her in the same situation that she had me in at the end of the last match with Azumarill versus Charizard. So she does throw off a Blast Burn there. I shield the Blast Burn. I've got her in a good spot here. I want to just get a bunch of energy built up. I throw off an Ice Beam here, which is going to do decent damage, or Beta Shield. It does grab her shield. So at this point then I'm going to be able to bubble pretty much all the way down until it's knocked out, and I've got a whole bunch of energy built up. Dragon Claw doesn't do anything against Azumarill. That's probably not the correct move there. She probably should have gone for a Blast Burn. I think she was fearful that she wasn't going to charge to a Blast Burn, so instead she hits 2 Dragon Claws. She would have hit 1 Blast Burn, which probably would have been better on her part for doing damage. So at this point here, I've got Azumarill back versus Quagsire, still positive for me. Got a ton of energy built up. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm actually going to take this Sludge Bomb. I know it didn't knock me out, didn't do over half of my health last time, so it wasn't going to knock me out, so I'm able to get off this Ice Beam here still. The Ice Beam does decent damage versus the Quagsire, and I'm actually going to be able to hit a second Ice Beam here, which is huge. This is going to do huge damage versus the Quagsire. And she actually goes ahead and shields it. So she's out of shields. I have 1 shield remaining. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to let the Azumarill go down since she burns all her energy here. If I were her, I would have tried to save the energy into the next matchup here, because that Ice Beam would have done either decent damage or burned my last shield here on the Venusaur. But Venusaur comes in, knocks it out, and I'm able to go ahead and fire off a Frenzy Plant on the Azumarill. She's got no shields left at this point, so Frenzy Plant's going to do a ton, and I have a second Frenzy Plant built up, farmed a ton of energy on the Venusaur, and that is the end of the round. So I go ahead and I'm able to pull off round 3 here, and we're going into round 4, sitting at 3-0. I'm going to be playing against the other 3-0, and you might be able to see here, he did go 4-0, so this wasn't the greatest series. And unfortunately, I did have technical difficulties recording game 1. So game 2 here we're going to be getting into. I had to shorten down this clip a ton because we had to restart 2 times going into this, so I cut out all of that. So we already know each other's leads coming into this, so I've got Venusaur, he's got Quagsire. Positive matchup for me. Plus I've got charge move priority on this one since I did lose game 1 as well. So we're kind of fighting for our lives here in game 2. So I'm able to flip out and get a positive matchup, Quagsire versus Mantine. I'm not going to sit in there and let my Mons go down in a bad matchup. So I've got Quagsire here. I'm going to go ahead and get up a bunch of energy. Stone Edge is going to do either a ton against the Mantine or it's going to grab the shield. So in this instance, I've got the Stone Edge going off here, and it grabs the shield. Aerial Ace does a decent amount of damage, so does Ice Beam. Either way here, I'm going to go ahead and shield this so I can get up to another Stone Edge, because I either want to knock this thing out or I want to grab the last shield. So I do get off the Stone Edge here before Mantine gets off another charge move. And I go ahead and I do mega damage here to the Mantine. So Mantine is almost knocked out. Mantine is either going to get me here or burn my last shield. I'm going to go ahead and let Quagsire fall. So that way the Mantine has no energy left remaining, and I'm able to just flip into this Frenzy Plant here, which is going to go ahead and knock out the Mantine. So Mantine goes down. I didn't want to take a whole bunch of wing attacks because I know I'm going to need the Venusaur for the end here. Venusaur versus Venusaur is definitely a decent matchup, but I'm going to go ahead and farm a whole ton of energy here and flip into Charizard. So with Charizard going, I'm able to do quite a bit of damage. And it's the Quagsire. So the Quagsire comes back in here. I fire off a Dragon Claw here, expecting a shield. No shield there at all, surprisingly, so that kind of caught me off guard a little bit. So I'm sitting here, I'm either going to die or I'm going to use my shield. So I'm going to go ahead and use my shield, so that way then I can not take the Stone Edge damage. I farm up a little more energy here, and I go ahead and I hammer on Blast Burn. Blast Burn is either going to do a ton of damage, or again, it's going to grab the shield. It does grab the shield this time. So I keep sitting here doing damage. I'm able to get off another Dragon Claw before Charizard goes down. And with the Dragon Claw, that's going to do decent damage and almost knock out the Quagsire. So Quagsire is going to use all of its energy here, taking down the Charizard. And obviously my last mon is Venusaur, and his last mon is Venusaur. I'm able to take it down with one attack here, and then I'm able to just absolutely hammer because I've built up all the energy here. Hammer on the Sludge Bomb, and the Sludge Bomb is going to go ahead and take out the Venusaur. So at that point, we're 1-1 in this series, and going into the last game here, it's going to be for all the peanuts. The winner of this is going to win the tournament. It's definitely going to be close, so we're going to see what we can do. So going into this match here, I'm going to go ahead and lead Azumarill. Azumarill is kind of what I consider to be the safe lead, and we've got Quagsire. I don't like to take too many risks. Would have been cool if I would have started Venusaur there, but I did open Quagsire. Or I opened Azumarill versus the Quagsire, so we're going to go ahead and fire off an Ice Beam. We've seen this do a decent damage to multiple Quagsires throughout the tournament, and you can see it takes them down just below half. With this then, I'm kind of expecting an Earthquake to come through, so I go ahead and shield. It is an Earthquake, so I'm good there. Kind of keep building up here to hopefully another Ice Beam. Ice Beam is either going to take this thing out, or it's going to burn a shield. At this point, I'm going to go ahead and actually take this damage, so it ends up being only a Stone Edge. And I'm going to sit here, and I try to play a little bit risky and farm up a ton of energy. So I'm going to go ahead and fire off the Ice Beam here, and it goes ahead and grabs the Quagsire. I probably could have played a little bit riskier and probably gone ahead and fast moved it down, but he flops into the Venusaur here. I try and switch out here because I want to get a positive matchup. I should have fired off the Ice Beam first, and I didn't do that. So I flipped into Charizard. I'm going to go ahead... he flipped into Charizard. I'm going to go ahead and try and Rock Tomb the Charizard here, which would take it out if it hit, but it did not. And unfortunately, he's able to farm up a whole pile of energy because Fortress is real bad against Charizard. And so I'm kind of stuck here in a predicament. I can bring back in the Azumarill and fire off, an Ice Beam, which I do. Again, might not have been the best choice. I probably could have brought in the Quagsire there and waited down most of the switch clock. He doesn't shield at all, so I'm able to go ahead and get off quite a bit more damage, but he is able to pull off one more charge attack. I shield this so that my Azumarill doesn't go down, and I'm going to try and kill this thing on just fast move so I can fire an Ice Beam at the Venusaur. So I do get off the Ice Beam here, and the Ice Beam is either going to basically knock out or it's going to burn his last shield. It does burn his last shield, but unfortunately I'm sitting here with a Quagsire in the back and he's got a Venusaur. So the Venusaur is going to go ahead and knock out my last threat, which is the Azumarill, which an Ice Beam would have finished it. And unfortunately, here I've got Quagsire. He's going to get to the charge attack first, and that's going to be the end of the game. So I want to give huge shout out to A. Severtson for going ahead and winning this tournament. You can always learn something from some of the top players in your area, and I played kind of sloppy, but congrats. Here's the final standing, so I did finish second, and I hope you guys learned a little bit from this, and I hope I learned a little bit too.